The courtroom buzzed with the usual hum of activity. Lawyers flipped through thick case files, spectators whispered quietly in the gallery, and the faint sound of a gavel echoed from another chamber. Judge Anna Carter adjusted her black robe as she settled into her seat at the bench. Another day, another case? Or so she thought. The bailiff's voice rang out. The state of Texas versus Michael Gray. Anna glanced at the case summary in front of her. Assault, theft, resisting arrest. Her chest tightened slightly, a pang of disappointment settling in. Another person tangled in the system, she thought. But when the defendant was led into the courtroom, shackled at the wrists and ankles, Anna froze. Her breath hitched. It was Michael Gray. Her Michael, the boy she'd grown up with, her best friend. The room seemed to tilt slightly as memories flooded her mind. Lazy summer afternoons spent fishing by the creek in Cedar Ridge. Late-night talks under the sprawling oak tree behind her house. The secret promises they'd made to always stick together, no matter what. But the man standing before her was a shadow of the boy she remembered. His broad shoulders slumped, his once vibrant face lined with hardship. And yet, those green eyes, those familiar, piercing green eyes, were unmistakable. Anna's grip on her gavel faltered, her polished composure momentarily cracking. Michael's gaze swept across the room, landing on her. Recognition flickered in his eyes. His jaw clenched, and he quickly looked away, his head bowing slightly. The courtroom held its breath. Anna forced herself to steady her voice. Mr. Gray, you stand accused of assault and robbery. How do you plead? Michael's voice was rough, unfamiliar. Not guilty, Your Honor. Anna's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to stop everything, to demand answers. How had their paths diverged so drastically? What had led him here, to this courtroom? But she couldn't. Her role as a judge demanded impartiality. Proceed, she said firmly, gesturing to the prosecutor. As the prosecutor launched into the opening statements, Anna's mind drifted back to Cedar Ridge, the small, sleepy town where they'd both grown up. She and Michael had been an unlikely pair. Her family lived in a tidy, whitewashed house on Maple Street, while Michael's family scraped by on the outskirts of town in a weathered cabin surrounded by dry fields. Their friendship had begun by chance. She'd wandered too far from her backyard one afternoon and stumbled upon Michael fishing by the creek. His line was tangled, and she had offered to help. That small act turned into years of adventures, secrets, and shared dreams. Anna, Michael had once said, lying on the grass beside her under a sky full of stars. Do you ever think about leaving Cedar Ridge? About going somewhere people don't look at us funny just for sitting together? She had laughed then, brushing off the idea. But Michael wasn't joking. Even as a child, he saw the world for what it was, a place that didn't always make room for people like him. Their friendship deepened despite the whispers and disapproving glances. But one summer evening, it all came crashing down. Anna's father found them sitting on the porch together, laughing like they always did. His voice was sharp, filled with authority. Anna, get inside, now. She hesitated, glancing at Michael. He gave her a small, sad smile. Go on, he said quietly. I'll see you around. But she didn't see him again. Not really. Her father forbade her from spending time with him, and soon after, Michael's family moved away. Anna buried herself in her studies, chasing dreams of fairness and justice. But she never forgot him. Now, decades later, he stood before her, a defendant in her courtroom. The prosecutor painted a damning picture of the alleged crime. Michael was accused of robbing a convenience store in Dallas, assaulting the clerk, and being caught nearby with stolen cash. Anna studied him carefully as the prosecutor spoke. His posture was weary, his expression unreadable. Was he guilty? Or was there more to the story? When the court broke for lunch, Anna retreated to her chambers. Her assistant, Claire, knocked softly on the door. Judge Carter, are you all right? You seemed distracted. Anna hesitated. Should she confide in Claire? Would it be unprofessional to admit she knew the defendant? Instead, she shook her head. I'm fine, just a lot on my mind. But she wasn't fine. The past she had carefully locked away was now staring her in the face. When court resumed, the defense attorney, Sarah Blake, began her opening statement. The prosecution would have you believe this case is simple, but it's not. My client, Michael Gray, has maintained his innocence from the start. We will show that the evidence against him is circumstantial at best. The first witness was the store clerk who described seeing a man in a red hoodie argue with the cashier before lunging over the counter. Sarah's cross-examination was sharp. Mr. Wallace, you said the suspect wore a red hoodie. Did you see his face clearly? No, the clerk admitted. It was dark. So you're not certain it was my client? Sarah pressed. The clerk hesitated, but finally admitted, no. The defense introduced surveillance footage from the store. The grainy, poorly lit video showed a figure in a red hoodie moving quickly through the store, but the face was impossible to identify. Sarah argued that the video was inconclusive. Michael's alibi was weak. He claimed he had been walking home from a friend's house, but the friend refused to testify. The defense called the arresting officer to the stand. Under questioning, it was revealed that no red hoodie had been found in Michael's possession, and no search was conducted in the surrounding area. Finally, Michael took the stand. His voice trembled slightly, but his words were clear and heartfelt. I've made mistakes in my life, he said, addressing the jury. But I didn't do this. That night, I was just walking home. The police didn't ask questions. They just assumed I was guilty. His words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Anna's chest tightened as she watched him. The boy who had once been her best friend was now a man fighting to prove his innocence. The jury deliberated for hours. The courtroom emptied and refilled as the tension mounted. Finally, the foreperson stood, holding the verdict in trembling hands. In the case of the state of Texas versus Michael Gray, we find the defendant not guilty. The room erupted in murmurs. Michael's shoulders sagged, relief washing over his face. Anna tapped her gavel, restoring order. The jury has spoken. Mr. Gray, you are free to go. As the courtroom emptied, Michael lingered by the door. Then, to Anna's surprise, he approached her bench. His voice was quiet, but firm. You knew me, he said. Why didn't you say anything? Anna swallowed hard. Because I couldn't. I had to be fair. Saying something could have jeopardized the trial? Michael studied her, his expression a mix of hurt and understanding. Fair, he repeated. The world's never been fair, not for people like me. Anna nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. I know. I'm sorry, Michael. I wish I'd done more. Michael gave her a faint smile, his posture softening. We were kids. We didn't know better. But now you do. I do, Anna said firmly, and I won't waste it. Michael nodded and walked out of the courthouse, his head held high. Anna sat alone in the empty courtroom, her mind heavy with the weight of his words. She had upheld the law, but the trial had shown her that justice was about more than rules and verdicts. It was about the people whose lives were shaped by the system. She couldn't change the past, but she vowed to do everything in her power to create a better future.